and welcome back to the Down to the Wire podcast. It is here, or nearly. The Euros are nearly upon us. This episode, we are going to be doing a kind of like a preview, I guess, kind of the whole tournament, but mainly talking about the group stages. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good. We've just recorded the Formula 1 one, so I'm in the zone.
We're in the zone. And because it's a special occasion, this happens once every 4 years, or in this case, it's year 5. We've got some guests, plural. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
That's all right. We feel like we hadn't had you on for a while, so we thought now would be the opportune moment to have your grand return.
It's been a while. Last time I was on the brink of crying about Liverpool's season, and since then Liverpool have finished third. Things have changed. It has been a while.
Yeah, that shows you how long it's been. And we're also joined by our local football encyclopedia, that is David Williams. How you doing, Dav?
Yeah, good, thank you. Looking forward to a bit of football chat. The sun's out, summer's here. It's a good time, isn't it?
Wales are going to win the Euros. Fantastic. So I guess we should crack on. There's a lot to get through. So, Jack, do you wanna kick us off?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to. The first topic of conversation is who do you guys think are the favourites to the tournament? I sort of listed some of the big boys, but
straight in.
Yeah, who do you guys think are the favourites? I'm not saying who is your choice to win, but who do you think are the favourites going to the tournament?
Josh, go.
Yeah.
France. Do you want me to expand?
Yeah, go on. Give us a justification.
On paper, I think they're favourites, and form is good. Good through qualifying. But equally, looking at them against Wales in the warm-up match, I know Wales were down to 10, but I don't think France got anywhere near top gear and still looked pretty impressive. So,
yeah. And the terrifying thing is that an attack which already contained Kylian Mbappe and Antoine Griezmann has now been reinforced by the addition of Karim Benzema. Which is terrifying.
Do they still have Olivier Giroud in that squad?
Yeah.
I feel like he's probably. I feel like he's fallen down the pecking order now that Benzema's there, though, because I think Benzema probably. Well, he fulfills the role that Giroud did play, didn't he? In that he's a bit more of a number 9 rather than a centre forward, I guess. But,
fair.
To expand a little bit more on France, I think France are one of the few teams that have, I think, a 2 or 3 deep in every position with top quality players. So I'm talking about the Welsh, the warm-up match, and no Kante. Benzema's come back into that side, but you put Kante in there, it's a better team straight away. Again, centre halves, they've got incredible depth at centre back. I don't think any other team at the tournament. I think the only other one who I would have probably as my second favourite would be Belgium, but I don't think Belgium come close to France in terms of squad depth.
Cool.
Fair enough.
What about you, Dad?
Yeah, you can't disagree with France, really. Their squad is so good, and yeah, Belgium aren't. They're not far behind with Martinez and his tactical awareness. They finished 3rd at the World Cup, didn't they? So they were unfortunate. They were there or thereabouts at the World Cup, and this is probably the last chance for a particular number. Their average age is pretty old for the Belgium squad, so I think. And France and Belgium are on opposite sides of the draw. If you expected to go how you'd think if they finished top of their groups, so that could be a final quite possibly. I think as a dark horse, I'd probably throw Italy in, only because I think everybody forgets they weren't at the last World Cup.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. So Mancini's really gone in and rebuilt that team, and yeah, obviously Italy are a big force in football, and it's not a dark horse suggestion on the one hand, but given that we've not seen them in an international tournament for 5 years, and the way that they've gone about it, they come in under the radar a little bit. and their group is pretty favourable for them. So I think Italy could be in the mix, but I wouldn't disagree with Joss on France and Belgium.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I would probably also say France. Like when you look at the depth that they have, they are the reigning world champions. And like I said, they've got the addition of Karim Benzema, which is just unfair, really. I feel like Germany are probably do a good tournament because they had a bit of a stinker at the World Cup. I can't remember how they got on in the last Euro tournament, to be honest. It's been a while, but they've got.
They got to the semis, I think, didn't they?
Oh, did they? Okay, fair enough.
It was France, wasn't it, on pens? I got that right?
I can't even remember now. Oh, yeah, it might have been. I think you're right there. I feel like they've got, they've got some quality players, haven't they? Like, they've got Matt Hummels, Thomas Müller, Kai Havertz just coming off the back of their, Champions League winning performance.
And let's not forget Bayern Munich won the Champions League. Not this. Oh no. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they won
season.
The season before.
Yeah, last season.
Last season, yeah. So as in, I feel like they possibly do a good tournament. I think so. But I still think my head is telling me France.
I do think that even though Germany do have a handful of promising young players, I know national teams, they talk about golden generations, don't they? So like Dav has already said, I think Belgium, really, their golden generation, this might well be their last chance, looking at they were there or thereabouts 5 years ago, and Wales knocked them out, and they were probably joint tournament favourites then. Went well at the World Cup, but then fell short. What was it? Semi-finals, quarterfinals.
Yeah, France, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they knocked Brazil out prior to that. So yeah, you talk about golden generations. I think you look at France now, and I think France look like they're bang smack in the middle of a golden generation, whereas Germany, I feel like Germany's golden generation has come and gone, and I'm not sure they've quite got the talent that they had. Well, they won the World Cup 7 years ago, didn't they? And you look at that team, or even in 2010 when those players kind of hit the scene, like Neuer, Özil when he was really, really good, Müller, Schweinsteiger, those types of players. I don't think Germany, I think they've kind of come past that stage, and I don't think they've quite got the talent that they have in the past.
It's hard to
doesn't mean they won't be there or thereabouts though.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that when you think they went out in the group stage of the World Cup in 2018, didn't they?
They had a bit of an overhaul since then, in terms of.
Well, yeah, you say that though. Yeah, but then he's brought Müller and Hummels back in, hasn't he, for this tournament? Which that doesn't send a great vote of confidence out to the players that he has been trying to use. I think he's got too much. There's too many. He's got a lot of good individual players, like that midfield. You take any of like Gundogan, Havertz, Kimmich, Kroos, Goretzka. Like there's a lot there. I think it's interesting that the next Euros is there in Germany in 2024. I think that they, as Josh says, they're in a bit of a midpoint, and maybe 2024 will be their tournament. I think this one might have come a little bit too soon for them.
Fair enough.
You just mentioned a couple of golden generations. Wales has Joe Allen at the moment. What do you think their chances are for this tournament?
Love that segue.
Any team with Joe Allen in is a vastly improved one.
I mean, in all seriousness, I thought this when the Welsh squad was announced, like, on paper, when you look at that squad, I don't think it's any, and like I know, Joe Allen, players like Joe Allen, Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey, Ben Davies, like compared to Euro 2016, they're 4 years older, obviously, but as in terms of the overall squad quality, I didn't think it was any worse than 2016, as in like, let's not forget, Hal Robson-Kanu was a free agent going into Euro 2016, and he managed to pull off a Cruyff turn, so if that can happen, got to have some positive thinking, I think.
I really like the look of the Welsh squad. I'm with you on that. I think in the last 5 years, I think Wales have blooded a lot of young talent, and I think there's a lot of young players who, there's a lot of young players who I think almost improve, perform better when they play for Wales than they do at their club.
Yeah.
I'm thinking players like Dan James. Dan James for Wales quite often seems to be a bit of a different animal to Dan James at Man United. Harry Wilson's played very, very well for Wales, and I know he's been playing well for Cardiff, but it doesn't look like he's going to get his chance to stay at Liverpool. It doesn't look like he's going to continue at that level. But players like that have gone really, really well for Wales through qualifying.
And they've got Big Joe Rodon, haven't they, Dav?
He is going to be a star, boys, I tell you.
I'm with Dav there. No,
Yeah,
I'm with
he is
Dav
class.
there. I think
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I can't understand why at Spurs, one of the decisions that seems to have happened since Mourinho's gone and Ryan Mason has come in is to continually start Eric Dyer and leave Joe Rodon not even on the bench but out of the squad a lot of the time.
Because
Joe Rodon's
Ryan
a really, really good
Mason's
player.
mates with Eric Dyer, that's why.
Love that. Love that. Absolutely love that.
In the spirit of keeping it moving, because we've got so much to go through, should we start discussing Group A, being as Wales are in it?
Good shout.
Yeah.
Okay, I've sort of put some stats in our notes, but in a sense, we were just talking about Wales. Do you think Wales have much of a chance of getting out of this group?
I think they've got a good chance of getting out of the group. I think Italy are favourites for the group. If you look at Italy's record through qualifying, but the tricky thing is that the other three teams also went well in qualifying, and I know they're not necessarily, Switzerland and Turkey are not necessarily teams that you would think of as being shoo-ins to get to the knockout stages, but it's a group where I think on paper Italy should win the group. And then the other three have all had pretty decent qualifying runs to get to the tournament, and it's I think they're all going to be tight matches. That's my prediction. As a Welsh fan, I think all of Wales's matches are going to be really, really tight affairs. It's tough to call.
Yeah,
really tough to call.
For me, obviously Italy are favourites, as you said. When you look at their records, as in just plucking some stats now, 10 games in qualifying, 10 wins, 37 scored, 4 conceded, that's majorly impressive form. But I think the rest of them, for me, the second spot comes down to Switzerland or Wales.
Really?
And I think ultimately, I think so, yeah. And I think when you look at the players that each team has got, I think, perhaps I'm just being a bit of a biased Welshman here, but I feel like any team that has Gareth Bale has always got a chance,
But Turkey have Arda Turan. I don't know if he's still playing for them, if I'm honest, but they played 10 games in qualifying, only lost 1 in a group with France and Iceland. You know what I mean? I know Iceland didn't qualify this year, but that's a French team, and that means they didn't lose against them on 1 occasion. And they only conceded 3 in 10 games. That's pretty impressive for a Turkey team. You know what I mean? They could go under the radar, I feel.
Fair enough.
I think it's one of the it's got the look of a group where the third place team could qualify. I think it's got the look of a group where I think you're making an assumption here, but let's assume that Italy do finish top. I'm making a bit of an educated guess that Switzerland, Turkey and Wales will all take points off one another at some point. It's got that sort of look to it. So you might have the third place team in that group going through as one of the better third place teams. Turkey's qualifying record is good, very good, especially in a group with France. Having said that, I think before the Nico Williams sending off, I thought Wales looked very, very. They didn't look like a handful against France in a really good way. I don't think Wales have got anything to be intimidated by in that group. It's tough to call which two will go out.
I wonder as well, what's hard about all of this, isn't it, is when you talk about form, the qualifying games for this happened about 2 years ago, didn't they?
Yeah.
18 months ago. So that's a long time in football. So
yeah.
I don't think it's interesting. Turkey's defensive record in the qualifying was very good, but in more recent times, they've conceded goals in the Nations League and things, and it's just hard. I'm not saying that. I do think personally, if I had to pick 3 teams out, I'd say Italy, Wales, and Turkey would be the 3 that will edge through, but it's hard to kind of draw too much from how their defence did 18 months ago because, setups change, players change, form and all of that. Like, it's not like the Premier League where form is... You can read more into form because it's week in, week out. You've got to get into the group stage and play a couple of games and then you pick up your momentum, don't you? It's not a case of how many goals did they concede 18 months ago, which is not to say that obviously their performance was their performance and they did very well. I think it means you've got to take some of those numbers with a slight pinch of salt.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point.
Well, sort of talking on the more...
And that's unique to this tournament.
Talking on more of the more recent stats, I guess, in a sense. Italy are on a streak of 8 consecutive wins, that is, without conceding a goal, which is mightily impressive, and I imagine does put the other 3 teams... I mean, it's got to really kill your confidence going into a group with a team that's performing that well in the current...
Just doesn't concede.
Current climate. So
I have a question.
Go on.
I know Wales play Italy in Rome. Where are Italy's other 2 games, group games?
They're all in Rome, I believe.
Surely they're not in. Surely they're not in Rome for all 3, are they?
Group A plays its games in Rome. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's going to be home advantage.
That's worth bearing in mind. Yeah. That's worth bearing in mind, isn't it? All 3 of the other teams have got to go to the on paper the stronger team and beat them in their own stadium.
I'm not even sure if Italy's a green nation for Wales to go travel to, so that might also hinder them a little bit. But yeah, if you're sort of wrapping up this group, what do you think Dav said he thinks the 3 teams finishing top are going to be Italy, Turkey, Wales. In that order, would you say, Dav?
Well, it could be, but I do think the way that Wales have played... If you take recent World Cup qualifiers, I thought Wales played very well. Belgium was a difficult game. They beat Czech Republic at home. I think Czech Republic are very much the kind of level of Switzerland and Turkey, and Wales held their own with that. So I think it's possible, very possible, that Wales could finish second. I'd be disappointed if they didn't finish third. So I'll say Italy, Wales, Turkey, just because I'm a Welsh fan, but it could easily be the other way. I just think Switzerland are too inconsistent. They are an enigma of how they've been able to be in the top 10, 15 teams on FIFA rankings for years. And you look at them and you go, how?
Yeah. Guys like Granit Xhaka, and they've got a Sebastian Haller. Has he played for them as well? Or they might be Austria saying that. But you know what I mean? So they seem just to have sporadically average guys that for some reason...
any Liverpool fan will tell you if Shaqiri turns up, if Shaqiri turns up, they'll do all right. But any Liverpool fan will tell you it's turning up that's the problem.
Oh, that's philosophical. That is very true.
That's a good way to wrap up that group in a way. That's a good sentiment to end with. Maybe we'll do a prediction from different people for different groups and see how we go, just to save time anyway.
Good show.
Group B: Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Russia. It's probably one of the groups that we may have the least invested in, being as 3 of those teams are Scandinavian, so really far away from us. But how we initially seeing this group shape out?
Belgium will win it.
Belgium win the group.
I think so.
There we go. No, yeah. To be fair, I think everyone's probably going to go with a Belgian win. I mean, they absolutely dominated in qualifying. Now, as we say, we take that with a pinch of salt. But 10 games, 10 wins, 40 scored, 3 conceded. No team came away with a better goal difference than them during the qualifying stage.
If Belgium don't finish top of that group, that has got to be one of the biggest shocks in sport.
Yeah.
Whoa, you can't just go saying things like that, Jack.
Yeah, Jack.
I just did.
One of the biggest shocks in sport. Wow.
It will be like
that's not specific. That's generalised. Sport.
Yeah. Well, this is a sports podcast, is it not?
Amen.
I mean, when you consider Denmark, I think the only Danish player I can name is probably Eriksson.
Schmeichel.
Oh yes, good shout.
They're not going to concede.
That was the first one I thought of.
I thought of Kasper Schmeichel.
Well, actually, when you think about it, they've got Christensen at Chelsea.
Mm.
Oh, do you know what? Do you know what? This is a very good point.
They've also Højbjerg.
Oh, honestly,
Wow.
And the
he is a
biggest joke of
future
all,
Ballon d'Or winner. He is.
Barcelona's top striker, Martin Braithwaite.
Braithwaite, yes.
Is he Danish?
I would
Yeah.
not have guessed he was Danish.
I'm gonna say Belgium, Denmark, Russia, Finland for this group.
See,
I think Finland
I'd
will
agree.
finish bottom of the group.
I'm going to disagree. I think
Well,
Russia are just a
like-
force of nature. I think they're going to make it.
Do you really?
I mean,
Yeah, I honestly
Go on.
am all
Go
for
on, name one
Russia.
player.
Zauber, their striker. He dominated back in the World Cup, way back when. The last major tournament we had.
But it was in Russia, wasn't it? It was different.
Hey, but guess where this group's playing? Russia and
Well,
Denmark.
they are in Russia, yeah, that is true.
It's happening, it is. It's happening. Russia
to
finished
be fair
second, in
though,
my opinion.
like, I just want to say I very much stand corrected because when you've got like that caliber of play, you know, like Schmeichel, Christensen, Eriksson, and Braithwaite. Not so much Braithwaite, but you know, there's enough players there to cause an upset. I think.
Yeah, whereas Finland, we were Finland at
Yes.
Pookie.
Yeah.
A quality man he is.
Finland,
Levels.
strangely enough, are one of the lowest ranking teams, but they actually qualified for this tournament by finishing second in their group. I know it was obviously a while ago,
Well,
but that's
Who
a
else
group.
was in their group?
Italy, Greece, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina is the second highest ranked team not to make the Euros this year, so there's some good teams that have missed out because of teams like Finland performing pretty well.
Well, Finland, this is their first ever Euros, isn't it, I think?
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you want to have a guess?
that's a stat.
Do you want to guess who the other one is?
Oh, I know this, North
Other
Macedonia.
team.
They didn't
North
exist.
Macedonia. Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
quite
so
hard to
Can I
qualify.
just say, like, who would have thought that Martin Braithwaite, who plays for Barcelona, would be Danish?
It's that baffled you.
I'm sorry, Braith. That's really caught me off guard. Like, Braithwaite does not sound Danish.
No, not at all.
Anyway, on another note,
But yeah, going back to Finland, yeah, exactly. They're not really a team that's done anything, but they've just, I mean, they didn't even have a good qualifying, really. I know they finished second, but it sounds like it was just a dog of a group where I was going to say lots of draws, but they didn't actually even get a draw. 6 wins, 4 losses. Yeah, but what was your prediction, Josh, for this group? First, second, third, fourth? I think you said something earlier.
Belgium, Denmark, Russia, Finland.
Okay. I'm going to disagree and say Russia go in, but cool. There wasn't too much on that group, if I'm honest, so we should probably move on to a more interesting group. If you could call Group C more interesting. They play in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands are in this group, followed by Austria, North Macedonia, and the Ukraine. In my opinion, I think the Ukraine are going to be the surprise team of this tournament. They just got such a good defensive record as of late, and in the qualifying, that I think they're going to go the distance to the semis. But
Wow, that's a big call.
it is a big call,
Like that.
but I just got a good. You know, when you get that gut feeling about a team, my gut feeling this year is about the Ukraine.
Semi-finals.
Yeah, I think they get
Semi-finals. That's
bold.
bold.
They call that doing a Wales, don't they?
Hey.
Hey. That's
On-
bold.
On a slightly different note, though, I feel like the Netherlands would probably be in with a better shout if they had Virgil van Dijk. I feel like that is
Yeah, it
for
wouldn't
the
have- it wouldn't
tournament.
hurt
I mean, is in like
That hurts any team. Yeah.
that's such a huge loss.
I'd have Van Dijk to have in the same category as Joe Allen. Makes any team better.
They should start.
And
They
that
should
is
form
about
their
the
own team,
highest
shouldn't they?
praise.
Oh, can you imagine that? Whew. And then put Braithwaite up top.
Oh.
Steady on.
To be fair, though, they do still have De Ligt and De Vrij at centre back as options.
Oh, yeah,
and
they-
Fanake. That
I
is as
agree.
well.
Look, it's you know they have still got quality players, but I think in all seriousness, like Josh said, I think any team that had Van Dijk and then loses them is worse off.
I mean, look at Liverpool. Really struggled.
Yeah, exactly. It was a perfect example. Although Big Nat Phillips came through. But yeah, don't know if anyone else has anything to add on the group.
My predicted order for the group would be the Netherlands, Ukraine and Crimea, Austria, North Macedonia.
I wouldn't begrudge you of that. Although I think Ukraine are going to finish top. Personally, I think this is their tournament.
Really?
To make this
Well,
Really?
to be fair, the Netherlands do have a bit of a habit of having like weird tournaments, don't they? As in, like, when you consider like the talent they've had over the past couple of tournaments, like they've kind of underperformed, really. I think.
Am I right in saying that Dav said about Italy earlier? Am I right in thinking that the Netherlands didn't qualify for the World Cup 3 years ago?
Or the last Euros.
All the last Euros, yeah.
Was it both?
So,
wow.
So it's been 7 years since Robin van Persie scored that amazing diving header against Spain. Remember that?
Yeah.
What a game that was as well.
Gosh, that's crazy.
But those are the days of like Van Persie, Robin, and Schneider. Like so.
And
yeah.
And that
as in,
just makes you.
I mean,
That just makes you feel old.
yeah, well, as in, like, when you look at the players now, you've got Depay, Wijnaldum, De Ligt, probably Sillerson in goals, I'd imagine, is it? You know, as in, it's a different. It's a different team, isn't it? It's a different generation. So
Yeah, Frankie de Jong.
I mean, that could help them, I guess, in one way, as in gives them perhaps a bit of a clean slate to work off. But you know, we'll see.
I think I saw something somewhere that Sillerson is maybe not. Either he got injured or something to do with COVID.
Oh, is he?
Oh.
Okay, fair enough.
They had to, well, I saw that Stecklenburg had been called into the squad, but Tim Krul's still in the mix as well. So I'm not really sure who they're going to have as their keeper. They have a lot of good players on paper. Like it's just bringing it, it's bringing it all together, isn't it? With the Crystal Palace fan favourite Frank de Boer as their manager.
Go on, Jack. You were about to say something, I think.
Yeah, well, North Macedonia in this group, and they're only in it because of the Nations League and that sort of backdoor entrance for them. Do you like the prospect of teams like North Macedonia being able to participate purely because they're not a good team? Because, you know what I mean? They've only qualified because they were in Nations League Group D, and it meant that one of those four teams had to make it, in a sense. Do you think it really adds to the tournament to have let's be honest, a whipping boy for this group, because they are going to get absolutely slaughtered.
Well, I mean, if you're from North Macedonia, it's fantastic.
Well, the thing is, not even the North Macedonians support North Macedonia. Most of them support the other nations like Serbia and whatever other nations are bordering them, because they're not 100% agreeing with North Macedonia even being a country.
Oh, wow.
I think we're treading on geopolitical waters here. That
I was about to say.
No, it's not a controversial one.
We're starting another podcast.
Politics discussion with
Down to the wire, geopolitical topics.
But yeah, do you really think a nation like North Macedonia adds to a tournament?
Well, they beat Germany earlier in the year.
You're lying.
No, I'm not.
You're right. I remember that.
In the World Cup qualifiers.
You're right. That's a good shout.
I stand corrected. Nations like North Macedonia belong in this tournament. Yeah. Okay, fair play. That's a valid enough argument for leaving them in.
When you think about it as well, like, I know they've come in through the kind of back door, which I guess adds fuel to the argument you've said. But like, if you'd have said 4 years ago to like people from France or Germany, Wales are gonna, Wales are there. You looking forward to playing them? I'd imagine a lot of them probably would have gone, not really. As in, apart from Gareth Bale, obviously Aaron Ramsey was kind of well known.
But the difference there is they are
yes, Joe Allen. Everyone knows Joe Allen.
They are qualifying in those scenarios. I'm not saying that North Macedonia haven't qualified on merit.
Yeah, but it's through the back door. It's through the back door. I get you.
By default, a bad team was going to make it. No offense, but you know what I mean. In the scenario where you're saying about Wales, at least they qualified in a natural format.
Through the groups.
You know what I mean? It's
that's fair enough. Fair enough.
Especially when you see teams like we were saying, Iceland and Bosnia Herzegovina not play. When you know what I mean, they were some of the good stories of the last one.
Yeah.
I think though, like when you look at the way that they qualified, they had Austria and Poland in their group, and they just make games. They make things difficult. Like they only once conceded more than 2 goals. Like they lost to Austria 4-1, but otherwise, like they lost 2-0 to Poland. They lost 1-0 to Poland. Like they'll make it difficult for teams, and they're just happy to be there. So like even if they just nick a point off one of those other teams, like that's a really good tournament for them, isn't it? So I think I don't think they're going to be whipping boys necessarily. I think that they'll give a good showing. I think they'll finish bottom of the group, but still, I think there's an element of romance there that kind of, they've still had to merit. They had to beat Kosovo and Georgia to get there through the playoff system. So I don't know. I'm not against it. I think it's a good idea. It's only one or two teams, isn't it? It's not like they're letting a swathe of lower ranked countries in. So
that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to see how they get on.
That's good. Jack, do you want to give a prediction for this group?
Well, I'm gonna go with. I think Netherlands will win it, to be honest. Followed by. I'm going to be boring and say Netherlands, followed by Austria, then Ukraine, then North Macedonia.
Ah, no!
I'm going to be boring, sorry.
Ukraine!
You said that just to wind him up, haven't you?
Triggered. I've done this podcast with Jack long enough to know how to eke topics out.
Moving on to Group D, probably, it's one of the more interesting groups in terms of one of our perspectives. It's got two home nations, the two remaining home nations we haven't mentioned. It's got England, Scotland, then Croatia and the Czech Republic. I think this is the makings of quite a meaty group.
I agree.
You've got England and Croatia, who've met in the semi-finals of the World Cup. They also met in the Nations League back in 2018-19. And I believe they actually met again in 2020-21, but I'm not 100% on that. But, two teams that have played each other quite a lot recently, and it seems to be tit for tat in terms of who's top dog out of them two. What are your guys' thoughts on this group?
I think Croatia will top the group.
Ooh. Bold
Even though I'm not sure Croatia. Yeah, I'm not sure Croatia are as good as they were 2 years ago. I think they have a look of an aging squad to me. I might purely be basing that on their key players. I don't think Luka Modric is as good a player as he was 2 years ago. I think it's just age. I think it's just stage of career. Having said that, England, I think, will qualify. England will finish second in the group, I think. But I think England might do what England do. And England don't have a good record against Croatia. They don't. Since losing to them in the semi-finals last time in a major tournament, they've lost in the Nations League to them as well. And I don't know. I just don't think. I don't think England have looked that fantastic in their warm-up games. I don't know. I'm not an England fan. I'm a Wales fan. If I were an England fan, I wouldn't feel overly confident in Southgate. I don't think he knows what his best 11 is.
No.
And that's a problem going into a major tournament. And yeah, I think Croatia, England, Scotland, Czech Republic for me.
I think for me the problem with England is I feel like they've got a lot of players, but it seems like Southgate wants to play with 4-3-3, right? Would I be right in saying that?
I'd back you up. I mean, they may play five at the back, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
You never
but
know.
assuming they play four in defence, they're probably going three in midfield, three up top.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like he's got a lot of players like for example Mason Mount. I think he's an excellent footballer, but for me, I wouldn't have Mason Mount as a centre mid, and I probably wouldn't have him as a winger either. So then you're having to move your formation to accommodate those sort of players. I think Jack Grealish is another one. As in Jack Grealish is very good. I'm not sure he's kind of your box to box though. I feel like I don't know. Perhaps that's a little bit unfair. I mean, obviously they've got Harry Kane, who's been brilliant this season. I think he's something like the third player to win both the Golden Boot and the award for most assists. One player to do it. So, he's fantastic, obviously. But I don't know. And I think, like Josh said, the fact that Southgate doesn't know. I think it would be one thing if he knew the majority, and then there were one or two positions where players had played very well recently, and he was going to tinker a little bit. But like you said, I would argue that Southgate doesn't even know his best formation, let alone his best team.
I do feel like this team, I know like he tried to blood a lot of guys quite early on in his reign, in a sense, to get a lot of youth. And I feel like most England managers do that when they join, because it gives them about 4 years of leeway or life in the role before getting kicked out. But I do feel at the moment they've got Henderson and Kane, and they're probably two of the more long-term, maybe Maguire as well, if he'd have been played a bit more frequently as a youngster in the squad. But by and large, that's a very young squad, or a very inexperienced, particularly international tournament squad, I do feel. But
although
a lot of talent.
I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
I mean, I was just going to say, I don't think that's a bad thing for England, though, because I think part of the problem for England has been in past years the kind of, the older players having to deal with the exits and the knockouts through penalties, shootouts, and before that you had the golden generation that flopped at the 2010 World Cup, etc., etc. So I agree with what you're saying, the lack of experience, but I feel like you've got, perhaps a bit of free reign there, perhaps a little bit. I don't know. Sorry, Josh, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that I agree with Jack when you say you look at the squad and it's a squad bursting with talent. There's a huge amount of talent in England's squad. But I haven't seen Southgate get the best out of it, or B, pull it together into a good 11, and like you say, even a clear formation. I don't, you go through that squad, and who are the must starters? Well, Harry Kane's probably the most obvious must start. For me, I think they have to start Grealish. And I think they have to. I think he's one of those few players who, even when England are flat, he still looks creative. Past that, it's hard to put your finger on who are the without Harry Maguire initially, because Harry Maguire isn't fully fit, is he? I think John Stones should start. I think he's had a good season at City. You look at the other centre backs without Harry Maguire, and you've got Ben White, Connor Cody, Tyrone Mings, and Reece James played there in a 5 at the back in the Champions League final, didn't he? I think Reece James did very well there in the Champions League final. But again, it's hard to... Who knows who he's going to pick? I think John Stones plays, but who's he going to put alongside John Stones? I don't think it should be Mings. I don't think it will be Mings. Ben White wasn't in the initial squad, so you're looking and thinking, well, Reece James or Connor Cody then.
Or Kyle Walker, maybe? Do you reckon he could chuck Kyle Walker there? Because he has played at centre-half before.
Potentially. But I think Kyle Walker, you would assume, would start at right back. And what does he do with the midfield? I think a fully fit Jordan Henderson should start. A non-fully fit Jordan Henderson shouldn't start.
And the thing is as well, when you look at the type of player that Jordan Henderson is, he's not going to bomb forward and ping a ball into the top corner, is he? Jack Grealish is a very attacking central midfielder, as are players like Mason Mount. So you need someone like Jordan Henderson who's perhaps a bit more conservative. But apart from Jordan Henderson, I don't think they've got a player like that for the midfield, in all honesty.
Declan Rice does that job, doesn't he?
Oh yes, that's a good shout. That is a good shout.
And he's come on, actually. In this, I actually think for England, this postponement has been useful in the sense of this time last year, Declan Rice, Foden, surprisingly, he's had a real breakthrough season. Mount is another
Reece
one.
James.
There's a number of players who this time last year they might have just got into the squad, but you wouldn't be talking about them starting so much, would you? But those guys now are right in the mix.
When you think of someone like Calvin Phillips as well, last year he wouldn't have been in the squad, would he?
Yeah.
No, be a championship player.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so.
Reece James either wouldn't have been in. I don't think would have been in the squad this time last year. He's had an incredible season. And the other problem I have with England is I think you've got key players out of form. Yeah. I think Raheem Sterling is not playing well. Marcus Rashford is not playing well. And I think you've got a few. The talent is there. You know, you look at their forwards. They're taking forward playing players. They've got Grealish, Kane, Sterling, Rashford, Sancho, Foden, Saka, and Calvert-Lewin. There's talent there. There's huge talent there.
Yeah.
Does Southgate get the best out of them? Does Southgate get them playing in a coherent formation. Does Southgate get the best out of Jadon Sancho at a major tournament? That could be the difference. That type of question for not just Sancho but a number of players: Mason Mount, Jadon Sancho, Phil Foden. Does Southgate get their club form out of them on an international stage in a major tournament? That could be the difference between England completely flopping and making a semi-final or possibly even a final.
I mean, yeah. The thing is as well, I feel like England, bear with me on this, I feel like England right now are like that team on FIFA where they've just got so many good players, you can't fit them all in and you can't find a formation that works with the majority of those players included. That's how it feels to me. And I think that comes down to the fact that Southgate just doesn't know what his best team is.
What do you guys make of Scotland then? Do you think they'd rather get out the group or beat England?
Well, speaking to a Scotsman yesterday, his words to me were, as long as we beat England at Wembley, I don't care. So,
bet, as a Welshman, go back 5 years and the opposite is probably the winning option, isn't it? The opposite, looking back, to lose to England, but then to watch them crash out to Iceland and us go on a little bit of a run. Realistically, I think you would take that, wouldn't you?
As a Liverpool fan, we want Robbo to do well. What can we say?
I tell you what's interesting about this group. It's that the winner of this group will play the team that finishes third in Group F, which is the group which features Germany, France and Portugal. Whilst the runner-up in this group will play the runner-up in Group E, which is the group with Poland, Slovakia, Sweden and Spain. So it may be in all of the teams' interest to finish second in this tournament in this group. Would you avidly want your team to, I'm not going to say purposely lose, but...
Can I ask a question? Does that not depend on who the best third place finishers are?
Not with that particular one. No, it doesn't.
No, this one is very specific.
It does not. So it is guaranteed to be a third place team from a given group.
No, it's second place. It's second place.
Yes, I said apology. Yeah, I might have read that incorrectly. The winner of Group B...
say again. The winner plays who?
The winner of Group D will play the runner-up of Group F. Sorry, not even the third place team. The runner-up. Okay. But the runner-up of Group D will play the runner-up of Group E. So either way, you're going to play a runner-up. Or would you rather play a runner-up of Group E or a runner-up of Group F? I think you know my answer.
Group B, 100%.
I'm going up against Poland.
So, so here we go. So the point you're making is then, when I made the initial prediction of Croatia, England, Scotland, Czech Republic, that would suit England better than Croatia, 100%. If England are then going to, come runners-up, are then going to play probably Poland, and Croatia, who've won the group, are probably going to end up playing Germany or Portugal. You'd rather be the runner-up in the group, just because of the way the draw has gone. Is that the point you're making?
Yeah, 100%. I'm
with you.
Yeah, I'd be craving to be the second place team in that one. There's absolutely no gain in being the team that wins that group. Although I was just trying to quickly find out the final group games for that particular group is Croatia, Scotland. Okay, I was going to see if England against Croatia was going to be the final matchup, because if it would, I mean,
be epic.
You'd be looking at two teams scoring as many own goals as possible, I think, because I don't think either of the other two are going to be anywhere near them at that stage. But yeah,
I mean, you mentioned England playing Croatia, like that is the first game of the group.
Yeah, so does somebody really, go into that?
It sets the tone, though, doesn't it? If England lose that game, then the media's going to be on their backs, and what you've been saying. Yeah. Does Gareth Southgate know his best team? Why hasn't he picked Grealish, for example? Why hasn't he picked Foden? That pressure is really going to mount. No pun intended there. And
the case study there is the 2014 World Cup, isn't it? They had Italy in the first match, lost, and then they just couldn't build any momentum from there. Lost to Uruguay, drew with Costa Rica, out.
Yeah.
And that first game is huge.
Although another case study. Did they lose in the most recent World Cup as well in the group stage, and then end up going on to have what was it, Colombia, followed by it's another not so difficult team, and then got all the way to the semis against Croatia again. So
Well, Colombia was who they beat on penalties, wasn't it?
yes, I'm sure they played one other team on that route, but I remember them not being
Wasn't it like Ecuador or something like that?
Sweden.
Sweden in the quarters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was
there we go.
Colombia,
Where's like
Colombia
Ecuador
first.
from?
Well, Colombia, pretty close nationalities.
Yeah,
But you know what I mean.
it's all South America.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to make that much of a generalisation, but they are very close countries in terms of, I think. Anyway, bordering off the geopolitical conversation. But yeah, you know what I mean. It is a shame. Well, I don't know. I'm glad they play each other first, but it does feel like whichever team finishes second, I feel like both England and Croatia are going to win both of their remaining games, and it's going to be the loser ends up with the most opportunity to win the Euros.
Well, the thing is if England lose that first game to Croatia, ultimately there's the potential that it could come down to England versus Scotland at Wembley.
Oh, what
And,
a
like,
dream
that is
scenario
a-
that is.
That is a lot of pressure on England at Wembley then. Like, that's a lot of pressure. So, I think Dav's made a good point there. I think, really, if you're England, you'd rather build up to Croatia, I think. I think you'd rather get Czech Republic done, play Scotland, and then beat Croatia, ideally, obviously.
Whereas this is
Yeah,
it's
which is-
the exact opposite of that. Czech
Yeah,
Republic
it's
they
literally
played Czech
reverse.
Republic last, yeah.
Yeah, so, not
Which is similar to
ideal.
what they had to do in the last World Cup, wasn't it? Because they had, I can't remember the
Russia, wasn't
opening
it?
game. Pardon?
Wasn't it Russia?
No, well, they had Panama. I remember them.
Oh, sorry, in the
hammering
World Cup.
Panama.
Sorry, I thought you were talking
Yeah.
about Euros.
I can't remember who their opening game was, but they won their first two, and then they had Belgium, and they lost to Belgium. But by that point, they were already virtually
Yeah,
guaranteed to
exactly.
go through anyway. And then even though they went through as group runners up because they lost to Belgium, they got a pretty the Colombia game they had to win on penalties, but they that's a fairly favourable draw. They didn't land a Brazil or a Spain or a Portugal or a France. Yes, you would rather have that game at the end, I think, than have to open up against Croatia. And again, the difference is it's probably to do with talent pool. But Croatia will go into that match probably with a fairly settled 11, knowing what their best team is. And I don't know, like
That plays a big role in tournaments, I feel, like international tournaments.
yeah. And I know I'm not picking on Southgate, but you look at the warm up games and you can kind of see what he's doing in that, he's got a few players in his squad who are not fully fit, and that doesn't make it wrong to pick them. I'm thinking Henderson and Maguire. And but because he's got those few players in his squad that he wants to take but are not fit now, he's ended up like not picking Lingard and then playing him, and not picking James Ward-Prowse and then playing him. And you just think, I just don't think it's helpful. Like, I think, already when you probably don't know what your best 11 is, you then bring in players into the team for warm-up games that aren't even going. And I just think,
It's
at the
messy,
very
isn't it?
least, use your squad players, yeah. And, I can see the logic in, I've got players who will be fit for the, during the tournament at some point. He's hoping Maguire and Henderson will be fit for the knockout stages, isn't he? Fully fit. But even then, I think, like, no, don't not pick Lingard and then play him. It just doesn't, how does that help anybody? It doesn't help him, it doesn't help the other 10. And it doesn't help you get any closer to knowing what you're going to do in the first match.
I mean, what's interesting is if you ask any Liverpool fan this season, they'll still tell you that Luka Modric is having had a great season because he dictated both legs when Liverpool played Real Madrid, didn't he? Like he's
100%.
true.
he's getting on, but he's still quality. He's still quality, and I think there is enough in that squad. They got
Mario
Perisic and
Mandzukic is one of those strikers like Giroud where he can score on any day.
Yeah. So we'll just leave that there, I think.
No, but in all seriousness, as in like Mandzukic is the kind of striker, like he's a big bloke.
You see
Like
his Spicy
if you cross the
in the Champions League
yeah,
final?
exactly.
Yeah.
Is it like he's not just a he's a big bloke, but he's not just a lump. As in like And he's one of those ones, like in the 90th minute, if you put a ball into the box, he's going to be going up in the air for that. As in, like, I'd agree with Dav. As in, like, I feel like Croatia have still got enough quality that you absolutely wouldn't write them off.
I think either way, even like, let's say it's a draw, I think really the ball is in Scotland's park, isn't it? Because they're playing the Czech Republic. You go and win that game, and you've got at least a 2-point advantage on England in the group. And then you go down to Wembley, knowing that that's a must-win game for England. You'd love to see it,
That's
wouldn't
huge,
you?
yeah.
You'd love to see that.
Oh.
And
the thing, like, for me, Scotland just needs to go into it and just be like, right, we're just going to play. Like, no fear.
yeah,
As in, like, they've got the benefit of being the underdog, I think, in all honesty.
I think as well they have got. You know, you look at their team; they've got quite a bit of Premier League quality in there. Haven't they? They got McTominay, Tierney's really come on with Arsenal, John McGinn at Villa. Like, they've got players in positions that can do a bit of damage, and Captain Robertson as well. So, yeah, I think they'll certainly give it a good. They'll give it a good go, won't they?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Good. So who wants to do the prediction for this group?
I'll do it because it kind of relates to something I'm going to say later. So I think it'll be Croatia, England, Scotland, Czech Republic.
Interesting.
That's my prediction.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Moving on to group.
Scotland.
Yeah. Oh, actually, just thought. The games are played in England and Scotland, just for reference for that group there. But the next group, all of the games are played in Spain, and the group features Spain, Poland, Slovakia, and Sweden. I think actually element B. That's probably got to be the lowest spread of alphabetical first letters for those nations. All S's and P's.
Great start.
Yep.
That is a stat right there.
Just quickly off
Love
the cuff,
that.
that was. Can't help it. I mean, by my opinion, this is going to be a Spain walkover, followed by a Poland sort of walkover with the other two. I can't see anything but those two teams going through. What about you guys?
Well, I mean, Poland are dangerous just for having Lewandowski there, I think, aren't they? As in, I think it's one of those ones where, like, you'd probably have Spain as group winners comfortably, but if the Spain-Poland game is nervy going into the last 10 minutes, you're like, they've got Robert Lewandowski, as in, like, can you write them off, really? So, but apart from that, yeah, it's a bit of a foregone, I think.
That's fair enough. What about Dav? What do you think about this group?
I think it's Spain have got to be favourites for it. I think the thing, Spain is very similar. I don't know as much about Spain as England, but Spain is similar in that I'm not sure they really know who their best lineup is. Like, it's not like days gone by where you're going, you know, the midfield was always Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets. Like, there is a lot more uncertainty. Ramos isn't in the squad, is he?
That's a good point.
He's injured, so that's a big thing. One of the things with Lewandowski is he's never really performed on the big stage, which, to be fair, I think is more to do with the team around him. You know, he hasn't got a Bayern Munich midfield putting balls on a plate for him, is he? So
No.
I think that makes it. I think it makes it tight with Sweden, actually, because when you look at the Swedish team, they've got a lot of good, players that are they're in Serie A, and you've got a few Premier League players there. I think Spain wins the group, but I think it's tight between Poland and Sweden, because Sweden are always there or thereabouts, aren't they? Like, they always get in and around. They get to a quarter or something, and I mean, Poland got to a quarter final last time, but I think it basically depends on who they end up. It depends on who their opponent is. If they're coming up against a top team, they don't win it. But if they come up against a team that's similar to them, the interest that I have in Poland is that they're managed by Paulo Sousa, who managed the Swans for a season or two about 10 years ago.
Ah.
So. Yeah, and QPR and Leicester, actually. So it's a bit of a random one, but if you dig deep enough, there's always a link to the Swans somewhere.
I mean, the thing with Spain as well. Sorry, Jack. I just want to
Go for
say
it.
this, if that's all right.
Go for it,
like,
Jack.
I don't feel like Spain have. I feel like I'm about to get mugged off here because I've missed somebody, but I feel like Spain don't really have an out-and-out striker, do they?
Morata?
But like I know
was-
Morata, but as in like he's not really that
Iago
good, is he?
Aspas?
I was
Mm,
going to make a similar point to this. Not so much they've not got an out and out striker. I just don't think they've got a very good striker.
No,
When you compare them against the other top teams,
Mm.
I feel like all the other top teams have got a really good striker. At least
Which,
a really
when
good
you think
striker.
about it, is mental because in 2012 when they won the Euros, they played. That was like the tournament where they made the false nine.
The
a thing.
false nine, yeah.
And they haven't really got anyone since. As in, they
Yeah.
had Diego Costa for a little bit, but
Do they need a striker that badly, though? I mean, obviously they had
I
David
think
Villa
so.
back then, but
I think so because I feel like they haven't got quite as much ammunition behind as they did when they won it in 2012. As in, like in 2012, they had players like Juan Mata, who was banging form for Chelsea. You had David Silva. Xavi Xavi probably wasn't there at that point, was he?
I imagine
I
he
can't
was.
remember. You had like Pique Iniesta. Was he? Oh, there you go. You had Xavi. You had Pique Iniesta, Cesc Fabregas. You had all of these kind of players right at their peak who could kind of accommodate for not playing with that number 9. Whereas I feel like now they've still got very good players, but I just don't think they're quite.
Well,
Quite, as in like when you look at the midfield, as in you're probably looking at Thiago in midfield is probably their best midfielder, but as in he's not, he's not a 10, is he? He's just a central midfielder.
a big fan of Sergio Busquets, I've got to say.
And he's tested positive for COVID the other day, didn't he? So
Yeah, he has.
That's true.
He's not going to play the first game.
So they've got Gerard Moreno who scored in the Europa League final,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he's quite inexperienced. So it's funny because I agree with the point that they are lacking firepower up front, but then they did beat Germany 6-0 earlier this year. So
Yeah, it's true.
That's
true.
but that was Ferran. I think Ferran Torres scored a hat trick. Like they've got a bit more. They got Koke. They've got a bit more in that midfield. So
It's an inexperienced squad.
yeah, it is.
It's an inexperienced squad. You've got a few. I mean, like Busquets is hugely experienced. Past that, I mean, your next most experienced, you've got to be
De Gea?
sorry, say again.
De Gea, maybe?
David Alba at left back.
Possibly De Gea. Jordi Alba would
Jordi
be
Alba, rather.
definitely one of the most. But you look through the squad, you've got a lot of players who have gone pretty well at club level. I'm looking like at Zama Traore, looking at Rodri,
Oh,
Thiago.
sorry.
I guess Thiago would be a little bit more, experienced in international. Go on,
I've
Jack.
got to disagree. I think that Traore may be the most overrated player, either in the Premier League or football. He doesn't do anything. He's all speed. He's got no control, and he cannot pass the ball. He just flicks it into space and runs. That's it. Can't stand him. But yeah, that's just a personal note.
Okay, let's move back to the
Moving
point. So someone like Laporte, before I know Laporte hasn't been a consistent starter for City,
Or Spain.
but like,
But what,
well, that's the point. Laporte has only just become Spanish, isn't he? And, I mean, he's been
become
Spanish.
Hang
He's
on a
become
second.
Spanish in the last few months.
Wait a
hasn't he?
minute, I'm Spanish!
I woke up one morning and was like, hola.
I'll
What's
have lunches at
happened?
3. Yeah, I will.
He woke up. Let's be honest. He woke up one morning and looked at France's list of centre backs and thought, "Nah, no thank
Not getting there.
you."
Mind you,
like
the interesting
Upamecano doesn't even make France's squad. So I mean,
thing
Yeah.
about that particular move, however, is that Ramos played quite a lot with Eric Garcia. So
Oh,
Eric
he's-
Garcia hasn't been getting into the City team, but think how much training that Garcia and Laporte probably have done
That's a good shout.
in
That's a really
over
good shout.
over the last couple of seasons. I know Garcia's probably leaving City now, but Laporte and Garcia will know one another. With no
and that could.
So with no Ramos, you put those two in as a kind of Manchester City centre back, and
Bit of
and the thing
solidity
is,
in
Dav. The thing is, Dav. There's no without Ramos, there's no and Piqué, there's no established centre back there. So
Yeah.
that could realistically be the pairing that they start with, because their other centre backs are Pau Torres, who played for Villarreal in the Champions League final,
Yep.
and I think it's Llorente from Leeds. And I think that's it in terms of centre backs. So none of them stick out as well. He's obviously going to play. So yeah, that's a really good point. They could start with Garcia and Laporte.
They probably do need a new set of fresh ideas. I mean, they haven't made a quarter-final since winning the 2012 Euros, so I guess this sort of new age of players coming through could be a good twist for them, for sure.
Yeah.
It could be. I see Spain similarly to how I see Germany right now. In terms of where they're at, kind of post-golden generation, still haven't really bought on the next generation, kind of in between, and that's where I see Spain. And similarly, I mean, I may be forgetting somebody, but have similarly on the striker front, did Germany lack a bit of firepower up front as well?
Well, you're probably looking at
Timo
Werner, aren't you?
Timo Werner.
Or
yes,
or
is the answer to that question then.
unless you play Thomas Müller up top.
Which I don't think they will.
Well, if Timo Werner's the other option.
He's been known to hit barn doors, Werner.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, they got Serge Gnabry, haven't they? Gnabry
That's true.
at Bayern Munich, he could possibly, but he's not a striker. He's a
centre forward.
He's like he's like a kind of Mane, Salah. He's not a number 9, but he's a forward attacking player. So
yeah.
and Sané is in the same breath as that, isn't he?
To be fair to those sort of Germany, France, Spain, they don't really play, okay, everyone's in their position and we got to feed the striker. It's pretty much when the ball's in the opposition third, you've got about 6 guys who sat in the box. You know what I mean? There's so many guys who could probably score the goal that they probably don't have to depend on on an out-and-out striker as much as, say, a team like Wales, where it's like, come on, Bale, we really need you to do something here.
Yeah.
On your point, though, about Spain sort of being in that same ilk as Germany in terms of perhaps next tournament is their tournament, I've always sort of viewed Spain more of like a chicken McCarney. It's got a little bit of heat, but it's never going to quite boil. But whilst Germany, I feel like they're going down to your Kormas and up to your Vindaloo's and back and forth and back and forth. So I don't feel like Spain are sort of on an upward trend or a downward trend. I just kind of feel like they are where they are.
I'm sorry, we've just found the title of this podcast. Spain. What did you say? They're chicken what?
Chicken McCarney. Got a bit of heat, but
Spain the
it's not insane.
Spain the chicken McCarney. Love that.
I think I'd see Germany in that road, possibly with a little bit of. I don't think I'd see Germany on a huge upward curve. I think Germany, have probably come forward from a really rough patch over the last few years. But yeah, I'd kind of have Spain and Germany in the there or thereabouts category, but it would be a bit of an upset for them to win it for me. And possibly there's a bit more young talent in that German squad. So perhaps in World Cup, which is only going to be a year away, isn't it? So perhaps you fast forward a year and Germany are in a better place than Spain. But I'd have them in a similar band in my mind, I think.
Fair enough.
Because there's talent in both squads. But there's also, I think, major shortcomings in both squads. And perhaps Germany are on a little bit more of an upward curve than Spain, but then, like Dad pointed out, Spain knocked 6 past them earlier this year, which was... when that happened, I thought that's a bizarre result. But it happened.
Fair enough.
Should we get a prediction for this
Yeah.
group?
What about you, Dav? I feel like you're overdue one. Probably your turn to get one up. What do you think about this group?
Oh, I'm going to say Spain, and then for the fun of it, Sweden, and then Poland, and then Slovakia.
Wow.
Fair enough.
Robert
That's a
Lewandowski.
shout right there.
Big Bob Lewandowski not making it to the
Big Bob.
knockouts. Well, actually, he might
Bobby
make it via
Lewandowski.
third place qualifying. Moving on to the final group, probably The group of death.
Group of death.
I don't think anyone's going to deny that. We got France, Germany, Hungary, and Portugal. Interestingly, the group is playing its games in Germany and Hungary. Whether that pays dividends with having a home crowd in Germany or Hungary, if you anticipate Hungary going on to beat all three of those teams. But yeah, this is probably the most highly anticipated group of the Euros. But I'd be very hesitant, really, to put a big prediction on this one this early on because there's so many factors at play. One of the first that I want to quickly flag up is that pre-tournament results. France have played Wales and they're playing Bulgaria this evening. Germany have played Denmark and Latvia. They played yesterday. I don't know the results of that one. But Portugal seem to be the only team that have really done it properly and said we're going to play Spain. We are. You know what I mean? A fellow really good team. Do you not think France and Germany could be missing a trick by not playing a top team in anticipation of this group?
Jack, Wales are a top team.
Yeah,
but Joe Allen.
Yeah, but they had a red card, so they obviously were diminished, which is why they got hammered 3-0. But in other news, do you think those two teams are missing a trick?
I don't personally, because when you look at these friendly games, like, you really can't read much into them because every manager is doing different things. Some managers are trying to get players fit and give players minutes. Some teams are wanting to try out formations and tweak things, and so I think they pick their opponents with those things in mind. So I think Portugal would have thought we want to test ourselves against a team that's going to set up against us in a particular way. Maybe Spain will do similar to Germany or whatever, so we'll take them on. Whereas maybe they're looking at playing Israel tomorrow, and Israel is more like your Hungary, like they're going to sit with a low block or something. So I don't think it really matters who each team plays. I haven't heard Robert Page talk about why they played France and Albania for Wales. Like, there was reasoning behind wanting to play a particular team in a certain way and to have systems in place. So I think every team does its own thing, and you can't really read too much into it, because I don't think any friendly that we've seen has, we haven't seen England starting 11 for the next week. We haven't seen France's starting 11 or Wales's. They're all mix and matching, aren't they? So until the tournament kicks off, then you'll really they'll show their hand, so to speak. So I wouldn't read too much into the friendly results in themselves, because you're not even playing the same teams, are you? Like, you're changing the keepers, you're doing all that stuff in order to give the squad a bit of an opportunity to impress, and it's all man management, isn't it? But what I will say is, isn't it awful that we've gone this long and we haven't even mentioned the reigning champions, Portugal, yet?
I was going to flag it up in our favourites conversation because, they are, to be fair, I don't think anyone was talking about them for the 2016 Euros. But they are criminally underappreciated. But I guess in a way they don't play the sort of attractive or brutally dominating football of the Germans and the French or the Belgians. You know what I mean? They just muddle together something and they'll get a 1-0 and they get on to the next game. They're just not one of those teams, are they? It's got to be an interesting tournament for Portugal for sure.
Yeah, they still do grind out games, don't they? But you look on paper now, their squad or a possible starting 11 now is much better than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
you've got Jota, you've got Fernandes, you've got Diaz, Cancelo. Bernardo Silva was in the mix, I know, before, but he's maybe a bit more
developed a bit more.
He's more of a starter now. Portugal's team, I personally, I think that Portugal are going to finish second behind France in this group, because they've got a way of playing, and they're very established. Their manager's been there for ages. Is it 6-7 years now? Like, they've got a way that they play, and they've got Ronaldo, so write them off at your peril.
But to be fair, the Ronaldo of Euro 2016 was either in the mix or at the end of 4 consecutive Champions League titles with Real Madrid. This Ronaldo's playing for Juventus, who almost missed out on Champions League football this year. Do you not think the powers of Ronaldo are sort of waning a touch? Do you think you can still rely on him that heavily?
Well, they don't need to rely on him that heavily because they've got Jota and Bernardo Silva and Fernandes.
Okay.
So I think that's the beauty of it. Their squad is better, and yet they've still got an individual who is class. And is still operating at the highest level. Let's be fair. Okay, Juventus haven't had a great season, but I think Ronaldo, he's still been scoring his goals. He's still playing for a top team.
Yeah.
You know, he's not playing in League One, is he? So,
Well,
I think
discredit League One.
all League Two. Yeah, I mean, if Ronaldo wants to come and play League Two, good for him. But at the moment, he's better than that, and everyone will appreciate that he is. And I think that's what gives Portugal a bit of a, they look a better chance this time than last time. Even though I don't think they'll win it, but last time, like you said, nobody gave them a chance. But this time, I think it could be a bit more entertaining. But they could easily just grind out a couple of 1-0s and get quite far in the tournament.
Fair.
Fair
I
enough.
I can't really disagree. That's a very good argument to make about Portugal. They are looking like a better team than they were 4 or 5 years ago, really. You interestingly said that France were going to be top, followed by Portugal, then Germany. Why in particular Germany third? What is it about them that you think can't cut the mustard with those other two?
Well, we've already said France have got the best squad on paper by a mile. I think they're the World Cup champions at the moment, and I think France are winning that group. They've just got so much talent in there. And then for me, it is a toss-up between Germany and Portugal, and I just don't think. I don't know. Portugal they're more settled. They've got a style of play. They know what they're doing, and now we can say they know how to win, don't they? Like they've won a major trophy. That was the first time they'd ever won a major trophy 5 years ago. And I think that Germany, then their defence isn't the strongest. Like we've already said, they've got a lot of individual talent, but the team itself, it's not what it was when they won the World Cup 7 years ago. And I think there's been a bit of pressure on Lowe after losing to North Macedonia earlier in the year. That's why he recalled Muller and Hummels, and Joachim Low is finishing after this tournament. So it's a kind of, I think there's a bit of a fear that they might kind of go down in flames. I'm not convinced.
No, I'm with Dav. I think the group will finish France, Portugal, then Germany. And I think my simple reasoning is I don't think there's a single area on the pitch where Germany would outclass Portugal. That's not to say Germany don't have good players. Midfield are probably fairly even. Like Kimmich is a quality player. Goretzka is a very, very good player. Toni Kroos, hugely experienced, brilliant player. Kai Havertz had a very, very good end to the season with Chelsea. But then Portugal can play João Moutinho, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva. Ruben Neves is there. William Carvalho is kind of a rugged but experienced player. Gone well for them. When it comes to the attacking third, I think Portugal, on paper, far outstrip Germany. Germany, possibly playing, Thomas Muller behind Timo Werner. Serge Gnabry is a very good player, but then, like Dab said, you've got Cristiano Ronaldo and Diogo Jota and João Felix.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Don't forget him.
With Bruno Fernandes in behind them, and again, Germany defensively have always been very strong, but I don't think Germany's defence is as good as Portugal's. On paper, I don't think Germany boasts as good a defenders as Portugal have got. I think you would take Ruben Diaz. Semedo's a decent player. João Cancelo is a good player.
Pepe's still in there as well.
Pepe is still there, whereas, Germany have got Mats Hummels, but then past that, I don't think Germany have got... I don't think they've got the same calibre of player as they usually do. So I do think Portugal... But I think the biggest thing for me is that I think Portugal will be dangerous going forward. I don't think Germany scream that they're going to be dangerous going forward.
That's fair. The team which seems to have no real ambiguity as to where it's finishing this group is Hungary. Do any of you...
Poor Hungary.
Yeah. Do any of you think that they are going to get any points out of this group? And on a separate note, when would you want to play Hungary if you were one of the other three? First, last, or in the middle? Open question. Let's start with Jack.
I mean, I feel like you probably... I don't know, perhaps this is just a general thing, but I feel like you'd always want to just get a win in your first game, because it immediately takes a bit of pressure off. So, you know, because if you're, you know, if you're France and you're playing Hungary in your first game, you get a win. If you're Germany and you're playing Portugal and you lose, then immediately the France versus Germany game is like must win kind of thing, you know. So, ideally, I think it's a bit different for this group because the other three teams are all pretty. You know, you've got one easy game and two hard games effectively. So I think you'd probably rather just get the easy game done, get the 3 points under your belt, and then go from there. I think.
That's fair enough. What about the other two? Well, other you two, I mean, Dav and Josh.
I think you wanna build that momentum, don't you? So
yeah,
play them first. Portugal are playing them first, don't they? So play them first, get a couple of goals, you're building that momentum where, if you're Germany and you're playing them last, if you've gone badly in the first two games, it might not even matter. You know, the group could be if they've lost the opening two, the group's gone as far as they're concerned, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's two things. I think getting the in inverted commas tournament football, every game is a potential banana skin, isn't it? But I think getting the on paper easier games out of the way does two things. It builds momentum and it alleviates pressure. And I think the other way around does the reverse. So either France or Germany, or both, will have dropped points after one game, which means that France and Germany will both be going into their second game feeling like they need to win. Whereas Portugal, in all likelihood, will win their first game, and they'll probably not have that same sense of, immediacy of pressure. So, you'd rather have Hungary first.
So, just to clarify, all three of you think that all three of those teams are going to beat Hungary?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so. But this is what I'm saying about Germany. I think if there's a surprising Hungary grind out an 0-0 draw, I think it'll be against Germany and not Portugal or France. I think Portugal and France have too much firepower.
I'm going to counter you here, because even when Portugal won the Euros, they really struggled. Well, they struggled throughout the tournament to beat teams. They won on penalties so many times that. Do you not think that? Firstly, Hungary could be a banana skin game, but secondly, if Portugal don't, if they draw against either Germany or France, it's going to come down to a shootout, basically, who can score more against Hungary. And do you really want to be Portugal in that scenario? Do you think they're going to be scoring more against a team like Hungary than Germany?
Yeah, I think they probably would, in all honesty.
When
you consider that Portugal have got
different Portugal, it's a different Portugal, and
they've got Ronaldo and Jota,
they're so much stronger than they were last tournament. Yeah, but even Fernandes behind them.
Exactly.
I think Portugal are just look so much more dangerous this time than last time.
I feel like
Portugal won ugly last time, didn't they? They won the tournament ugly.
Like Eder scored the winner.
He used to play for the Swans. See, there's always a link.
I feel like that should be the title to the podcast. There is always a link to the Swans. But back to the point about Cristiano Ronaldo. When can you ever remember feeling that Portugal don't have to rely on Cristiano Ronaldo? For me, never. But this tournament, I genuinely don't think they have to rely on Cristiano Ronaldo. I think they've got enough good players alongside him. Where in a strange way, Cristiano Ronaldo, towards the end of his career, for the first time is probably under relatively little pressure in an international shirt. Yeah, doesn't have to carry them.
Well, it's because he won last time, isn't it? He's done that thing Messi hasn't done in winning a title with his international team. So that's where that pressure has gone. I feel like Jack is fishing for some kind of hope for Hungary. So, like, I guess it's worth remembering that they did get out of the group. They did get out of their group.
They finished top. They finished top in Group F when they had Portugal in there last time.
Yeah. They drew 3-3 with them, didn't they? In that final game, and they got out of their group. And in the Nations League earlier this year, they did top their Group B, so they'll be in Group A next year with the top teams. So I don't think they're getting beaten heavily. I just think if what you've got to remember is in the playoff, in the qualification group to get here, they were in with Wales, weren't they? And Wales beat them home and away. So if Wales are beating them home and away, I reckon Portugal are going to beat them.
Yeah, it's very sound analysis.
To be fair, though, Portugal only won one game in 90 minutes in the whole of the last Euros, even though they won.
Yeah, but that was 5 years ago, Jack. It was 5 years ago.
Nah, this Portugal, they haven't got the mustard. They're finishing third. That's my shout. You know what? I'm not even convinced them being one of the top 4 of the 6 third place finishers either. I think Portugal are going to go out in their group stage.
So what you're saying is that Bruno Fernandes is a bang average player, right?
For Portugal, yeah, very below par. I don't think he does anything. I don't think he fits in that squad. I think they've got a lot of names, but I mean, at the end of the day, it was Eder that ended up winning them the Euros, not Ronaldo or any of the other guys they had, or Quaresma back in that one. But you know, I'm not fussed on Portugal. They didn't even do well in qualifying. I know that was quite a bit ago as well, but yeah, finished second. And guess who they finished second to?
Good old Ukraine, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Ukraine going to the semis. Who wants? So basically, you're all saying France, Portugal, Germany, Hungary, is it?
And what are you saying?
Me? I'd say Germany, France, Portugal, Hungary. I was in Germany.
So not only do you think Germany will finish ahead of Portugal, you think Germany will top the group?
Yeah. I think Portugal will slip up, and I think Germany will beat France.
I think that Portugal will win the group, and I think France are going to be French and slip up to.
Whoa!
Nice.
That's my
French.
prediction.
What a phrase!
Yeah.
Do a France.
Yep.
I like that we've all sort of got different permutations for this group. This not as cut and dry as it may have seemed.
I mean, I will say that in saying that, I've undermined the very first thing I said in this podcast was that I feel like Germany are due to win the tournament. But if there's one thing I've learned from doing this podcast is that all three of you have made very valid points as to why Germany won't win the Euros. So, yeah.
Fair. Right, that's sort of our run through of the groups per se. I have sort of got some. Oh no, put the other questions at the end. But should we go through some of the home nation squads? I mean,
yeah.
We are. I don't know why I said shall we. We are. But starting with Wales, do you want me to go through the squad, or should we just discuss the squad in an open conversation?
Yeah, just discuss it.
Yeah.
Let's discuss.
So, thoughts on the team? Firstly, the defence. I mean, I've spoken with Josh and Jack about the Wales team previously. The vibe I got from both Josh and Jack was that you thought the defence was relatively good and the midfield was a little bit lacking. Is that the case?
I think. Yeah, I think so. But I remember chatting to you about this, and I made a couple of statements that were based on the fact that Aaron Ramsey hadn't been fit for, and this was before he'd then come on and played minutes in the 2 warm-up games. So perhaps I'm saying minus Aaron Ramsey, Wales' midfield looks a bit light. But then what sort of statement is that? That's like saying that. Well, I don't know what I'm trying to think of an equivalent, but when you're looking at a squad like Wales, not a squad like England, when you pull out an Aaron Ramsey, well, yeah, Wales don't have many players as good as Aaron Ramsey. Aaron Ramsey's a superb player. I think Wales defensively, I like the look of Wales's options defensively. I think Wales have got more options than they did 5 years ago, more strong options than they did 5 years ago. Really like the look of it. And what does everybody else think?
Personally, I think the defence is probably going to get ripped to shreds in terms of, I don't think it's got a lot going. I think they're all names. Some are has-beens, some are yet-to-be's. But I don't think there's a back four. I mean, I think Ben Davies is probably the only good defender we've got.
I don't think that's
go on
fair
then.
on Chris Gunter.
Who's your has-beens? We got to pull this out. Who's your has-beens?
Chris Gunter.
First of all, Chris Gunter. All right, and then who's your not yet?
Yet-to-be's. Nico Williams, Ethan Ampadu, Joe Roden, and the other ones. I haven't even got a clue who they are. Chris Meffam is probably the only player who's actually, well, along with Ben Davies, in his prime, but he's not even good, so it doesn't count.
I think Ben Davies is our best defender when fully fit and playing well. I don't think it's fair to say Joe Roden is just a name who plays for a big club. I think on form this season, minus an error or two along the way for an inexperienced player who's just made his move to the Premier League, I think Joe Roden has played very, very well for a top half of the Premier League club.
Or just about top half. That's it.
I'll grant you that. But yeah, I think I like Ethan Ampadu as a player.
Dav, you seem to
I like Nico Williams.
You seem to be
I
quite
like Nico
against
Williams
me
as a
then,
player.
Do you quite strongly think this is a good defence?
I mean, first of all, you can realistically have Swans Academy back four, which in itself tells you it's a good defence. Ben Davies is quality. We're all agreed on that. Chris Gunter, I'm probably going to agree with the sense of he's past his peak, but what you got to remember about someone like Chris Gunter is he was there 5 years ago. You need a little bit of that experience. I don't think Chris Gunter's starting every game. I don't know if he starts a game, but I think having him there because of the rest of the guys, like, that is really huge. Connor Roberts is Premier League quality fullback. Like, I'm personally on edge that he's going to be signed this summer because I think he's got that engine. He gets forward. He's attacking. Ethan Ampadu has been made to look average because he's played for a poor team this year. If you put him in a better team, you see his strengths, and we've seen that to a point with Wales. I agree that Chris Meffam is a little bit of a weakness, but Joe Roden, he is class. Nico Williams, if you're training with that Liverpool squad every day, you're gonna be. You've got to have something about you, haven't you? So I think there's enough there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is a defence that wins the tournament, but I do think when you compare it to 4 years ago, is this when you think about Chris Gunter, Neil Taylor, James Chester, Ashley Williams, Ben Davies, that kind of back three, back five, is this better or worse than that? It's certainly not worse than that. You could argue it's even a little bit better. Our full backs, I would take Nico Williams, Connor Roberts, Ben Davies. I take them over Neil Taylor and Chris Gunter. So I don't think it's a bad defence at all, actually, and I think it's got enough about it to. And we've seen in the Nations League and in the World Cup qualifiers, take Belgium out. Because where they scored 3, I think that was the first time Wales had conceded more than 2 goals in a professional game in like 5 or 6 years. So we've got a bit of form defensively. So I don't think it's a bad defence at all.
No,
sort of combining with the defence. I mean, Wayne Hennessy, I assume, is going to be our number one, but he's not even the number one at Crystal Palace at the moment. Does that not put a bit of concern in your mind that, you know what I mean, he's not very match sharp and potentially prone to an error? Shall the ball get too close to him?
Well, I'm not even sure he will be first choice.
No.
Really?
Danny Ward has played fairly regularly, isn't he?
I think it's interesting. Danny Ward started the World Cup qualifier against the Czech Republic. And for me, if you want an idea of what this team could look like, I know that they were missing certain players, but that team, I think, is an indicator of what might happen on the weekend. And Danny Ward started that. So again, Wayne Hennessy's a big character. He'll be good in and amongst the squad in the changing room. He could start. Yeah, he could. He's got the experience. But Danny Ward, I thought, actually played really well against France, and it would have been 5 or 6 if he hadn't had the game he had. So I wouldn't say it's nailed on for Hennessy to start. And Danny Ward, I think, is unfortunate, actually, on the bench at Leicester every week. He could easily be playing for a middle of the table Premier League team. I think he's good enough.
Fair enough.
I don't think. Don't get me wrong. He's not the best goalkeeper. None of those keepers are the best keepers in the tournament. But I don't think they're terrible players, because even to be in a Premier League squad and to be on the bench and to be playing games semi-regularly, even if it's just the FA Cup and the League Cup, you're not going to be bad, are you?
No, it's true. It's true. I'd be honest. I think our biggest strength is our midfield, both in terms of experience. You got, as we were saying before, Ramsey, Joe Allen. That's kind of it. Well, Johnny Williams as well, but he didn't play too much in the last one. But also, I feel like it's got, in terms of, as I was saying with the defence, a bunch of yet-to-be's with Ampadu and Roden and Nico Williams. I do feel like the midfield with Harry Wilson, Dan James, David Brooks, I feel like they're a little bit more blooded in terms of this squad. Would you suggest? Do you think the midfield is? Well, I was going to say a good facet for our, or do you think it is also going to be a little bit lacking?
I think I generally like the Wales squad. I am making an excuse for myself here, but when I said that Wales's midfield could potentially look a little bit light, I was also counting out Joe Allen, because Joe Allen hadn't played for Wales before that France match in I don't know how long. I think I feel very similarly about if you look at the list of players in our midfield and the list of players in our defence, I think I feel very similarly about a lot of them. I think a lot of them are, there's some of them that play. Dan James plays for United. David Brooks has played Premier League, but currently is still at Bournemouth. But yeah, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I feel very, very similarly about the midfield and the defence.
Well, sort of the midfield feeds the attack, and the attack does have Bale, Kiefer Moore and Tyler Roberts. I think Tyler Roberts is of Leeds, if I'm right. But Kiefer Moore, as they were sort of talking about in the Wales-Albania commentary, was sort of his physical presence and sort of the sort of championship style of football he plays is quite physical, and they thought the referees at the Euros may not be very lenient to it and perhaps will foul him, or give fouls, award fouls in a sense for Kiefer Moore's actions quite often. Do you think that sort of plays into the thinking of the Wales coach's team selection?
I mean, it might do. It goes really to the heart of the debate about what is the lineup going to be. There's quite a bit of debate, isn't there, about whether Wales are going to go flat back 4, or are they going to play with 3 centre backs and wing backs. It's just working out really, like, where does Kiefer Moore fit, which is an odd thing to say given that he basically was so integral in us qualifying for the tournament. He came in and was starting every game. I think he scored in his debut. Has not had a bad return actually in the number of goals that he scored in internationals. So he adds a bit of a focal point. And yet, since Rob Page has taken over, he, for whatever reason, he doesn't seem to fancy him so much, and he's come off the bench in a lot of games, but he hasn't been starting games. Harry Wilson's played as a false 9, Aaron Ramsey as a false 9. So, at the moment, you wonder where is Kiefer Moore going to be even starting, let alone, and whether that's to do with this thought about whether he'll give away too many fouls. I'm not so sure, really. It's just a bit odd because, Sam Vokes kind of played that role in 2016, but he wasn't starting many games. Gareth Bale was our kind of roaming forward, but it was just that kind of get the ball to Gareth almost, wasn't it? Like, he wasn't an out-and-out centre forward. He wasn't a false nine. He was just, up the top end and playing through to him kind of thing. So, for whatever reason, they've not. It just doesn't seem, even in the last two friendlies anyway, like bringing Kiefer Moore on at half time against Albania seemed to give them a bit more direction. Personally, I quite like the idea of having a focal point, because otherwise, I think our issue is Gareth Bale isn't always in the box, like he can't be. So if Gareth Bale is out wide, he can't always cut in on his left. So you need to have like another option. So I think if you've got Gareth Bale on one side, you've got Dan James on the other, you've got Kiefer Moore as your centre forward, and then I don't know, you've got someone like a Harry Wilson or David Brooks, bringing Johnny Williams off the bench, someone who's able to sit in behind. I think maybe I'd like to see that, but I'm not convinced that Kiefer Moore is going to be starting, having seen recent games. That it'll be some kind of blend of Wilson, James and Bale probably.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think if it were me picking the team, I think I would pick Kiefer Moore, for the exact same reasons that you've just said, Dan. I think in a lovely way, it's a lot harder to predict what that starting 11 is going to be than it was 5 years ago. I do think that he will potentially go. I do think that he'll go for 3 centre backs and then wing backs. Purely because I think you look at the skill sets of Connor Roberts and Nico Williams, and I think it almost leads you down that path. Just because I think they both probably, compared with what Wales have had in the past, top quality wing backs. I think it just lends itself. From there, I think let's assume that, I think it might be a fairly good bet to assume that Danny Ward does start in goal. Let's assume he does then go 3 centre backs. I think you're looking at Ben Davies. I think you're looking at Joe Rodon plus one other. And who that one other is, I don't know. And, Dav said earlier on about it's hard to predict what sort of role Chris Gunter plays. Is it a Chris Gunter, or do you go Ethan Ampadu, or is it Chris Mapham? It'll be hard to predict who that third one is. But I think if he plays that formation, I think it'll be Ben Davies, Joe Rodon plus one other. Connor Roberts and Nico Williams as your wing backs. The midfield 3, if all are fully fit, I'd like to see Aaron Ramsey, Joe Allen plus 1. And I think that plus 1 comes down to balance, and I think it comes down to who's not playing in the front 3. Front 3, if it were me, I would pick Dan James, Gareth Bale, Kiefer Moore. Which means that third space in midfield, you're picking from. It's about the balance of the midfield then. Do you pick a Joe Morale, who is a more industrious midfielder, or you've got players like David Brooks and Harry Wilson who can drop in deeper, but that could potentially upset the balance of a midfield 3. I don't know. But I think I'd like the look of a Welsh team that went 5-3-2 like that. Thoughts?
That was a very in-depth analysis of the Welsh squad. I appreciate it because I don't really know too much about the Welsh squad, if I'm truthfully told. I wouldn't know about guys like Joe Morale. I tell you what, though.
I only really know about him from watching Wales, actually.
Just
he's one of those players I wouldn't know much about from club level. Is it Luton Joe Morale plays for, club level?
I'd love to tell you.
It certainly was. I mean, to be fair, I don't know if it still is now. Joe Morel, in my eyes, has basically been like the understudy to Joe Allen over the last year, hasn't he? Because Joe Allen has been out. He's been out injured, and it's added a bit of depth actually. Because he's not a wonder star big name, is he? But he's come into the mix, which makes the starting 11 harder to predict, which is a good problem to have, isn't it? Compared to last time out when it was pretty the team more or less picked itself, didn't it? Barring 1 or 2 spots, because we didn't have as much depth.
That's fair enough. I watched the League 2 playoff final with Newport County in it, and I was quite interested because the name Josh Sheehan was omitted from the Welsh squad.
I used to be a Swans player, just saying.
Well. Who hasn't? This stage, blinking it. Everyone is.
I've got to say, Dav, you've come good on that statement. There is always a link to the Swans. You haven't just made that statement as a throwaway. You've backed that
Honestly,
up numerous times on this podcast.
Every match of the day, almost every match, there's a link.
But yeah, going on about Josh Sheehan, I mean, I watched him in that final and I thought he was probably one of the better players on the pitch, and I thought, I don't firstly know why they released the Welsh squad before a playoff final where a player could be impacted by that, because I thought a bit harsh on him, especially when he's going to be feeling down about that in the game. But I don't know why we've left him at home, if I'm honest, because he looked amazing. Just sort of the hold midfielder you kind of wanted in there. He's pinging passes around. He was kind of like a prime Pirlo. Just what you wanted from a Welsh midfielder in that squad. I mean, and to be fair, I don't really know anything about Ruben Colwill or Dylan Levitt, those guys, so I don't know if they provide a service better than him or if they do the same role even. But
I mean, Levitt is he still in the books at United? I think Dylan Levitt's a Man United player, isn't he? So
I think he's still
you'd know about that, Jack, as a Man United fan.
But I don't, because I don't really care about the youth team.
But I think he's been out on loan in a few places. I think bizarrely he's been in Croatia in the last months because I think that was the only option he had. And yeah, I mean, he's young, and personally, I could understand how players like not only like your Josh Sheehan's, but like another name is Volks at Cardiff. Like he's had he had a very good end to the season, and he's not got into any of the teams. And I can understand players like that thinking, you know, I've got more experience, I've been around the block a bit more. What can they do that I can't? And having said that, I've not seen. I've only watched Dylan Levitt in a couple of Wales games. He hasn't looked like a bad player. And to be honest, he looks like he does have a lot of potential actually, but he's still him and Matt Smith are they're at similar stages. Like Matt Smith, I don't know if he's still on the books at Man City, but he was in the Man City academy, and I'm not sure really if Smith, Levitt, and Colwill they're not. I don't think they're starters in any of the games. Like they're there for they could certainly come on and do a job if they had to, I'm sure, but I think an element of it is that development and that they are good players, they'll become better players. So it's difficult, isn't it, when I'm sure, like, you know, Josh Sheehan now, his contract's come to an end with Newport County. He's probably going to get a move, at least up to League One, possibly even a Championship team. So yeah, he's a good player, but it's just difficult, isn't it, when you're playing in League Two and
yeah, it's hard to validate yourself for a spot in a national team side when, yeah, the competition you are playing against is going to be, you know, incomparable to what it's going to be on the national stage.
Yeah. So I don't know, but then you know you could argue, is Ruben Colwill better than Josh Sheehan? He's barely played any minutes for Cardiff, to be honest. Mick McCarthy gave him his debut with a couple of games of the season to go. But, you know, Rob Page has obviously seen something in him in the training camp in Portugal to think, yeah, we need that as part of the blend. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he comes on. And he came on briefly against France, didn't he, for a couple of minutes towards the end. So it'll be interesting to see if he has any part to play.
You mentioned Sam Vokes. Any other players that you think you would have liked to see, or you feel are quite unlucky to have been missed out?
Yeah, not Sam Vokes, Volks, Vaulks. He's midfielder at Cardiff. He had a really good...
This is as much as I know.
end of the season. Tell you what, Jack, you need to get into the Championship where the real football happens.
I do.
The real football happens.
Well, to be fair, there's quite a lot of teams in that, so you know what I mean. There's a lot of players to pick up quite quickly, and it's, you know what I mean. It's 7 teams change every year, don't they? How on earth do you keep track? Yeah, sort of. That's a pretty good spot to stop with Wales in a sense. We've got to keep it moving. Should we go on to England? I mean, there's probably a little bit more deliberation about 1 or 2 positions there, shall we say. Sort of starting off, Southgate prior to Trent getting injured, chose 4 right backs. What did you make of that decision?
I feel like it was a bit of a... He avoided making the decision, I think, personally.
I'll agree with you.
I don't really see how you can justify taking 4 right backs.
Yeah.
And I understand what he's saying. Oh, they can play multiple positions, but it's like, surely you've got players who play in those positions primarily anyway. So, for me, I feel like by taking the 4 right backs, he kind of avoided deciding which one to leave at home. Personally,
I'd be honest, I just see him as soft now. I feel like everybody was sort of moaning about having Trent there. And to be honest, I'd have preferred to have seen Southgate die on the sword of I'm not taking Trent over buckling to the sort of powers of people complaining and, you know what I mean, taking him along just because, in a sense. Because, as you're saying, he's sort of gone with the line of they can play multiple positions. But it's like, as you were saying, I'd much prefer to see James Ward-Prowse playing right mid than Trent playing right mid, just to appease people in a sense.
yeah.
So you would have taken another midfielder instead of a defender, would you?
Yeah.
Well, but this is the thing though. It's interesting because I thought that now that Trent is injured, I thought that's what he was going to do, but he's picked Ben White.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite interesting, and
so does that
even
mean
though I say I feel like
he was going to play Trent centre back? That was one of his positions.
Well, no, I tell you what I think he was probably thinking. He was probably thinking Kyle Walker could play at centre back, but now that Trent is in there, he's probably having in his mind Kyle Walker as a right back possibly, or perhaps he thinks he needs a bit more cover because if Kyle Walker plays centre half and gets injured, you're then down to not many centre halves. It's weird. It's very messy.
But I think that's because he's picked his team, and he's beginning to sweat on the fact how much am I going to get out of Harry Maguire.
Yeah.
So
possibly.
Ben White is basically Harry Maguire's backup, isn't he? If Maguire ends up not being able to play, and say Mings pulls his hamstring in the first game or whatever, well then you're really short at centre back then, aren't you? Out and out centre back. So I think that's what that is. Ben White is a good centre back, but he's in ahead of Ward-Prowse, not because I'm sure he'd love to have taken Ward-Prowse, but basically if Harry Maguire's fit, I think Ward-Prowse goes, but Harry Maguire basically ties a hand behind his back and he has to take White.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. I tell you what, though, I mean, I don't know. I'm not skipping the midfield. I want to go back to it. But in terms of a player that the least deserving player, I think, to be there is Saka. I don't think he's shown enough this season for Arsenal. Firstly, he's a promising player, but my goodness, it's a fledgling promise in a sense. It's not, you know what I mean? He looks good because he plays for Arsenal in a sense. It's like anyone could look good playing for that team. It's really rubbish. But you know what I mean? Especially when you got guys like, Ollie Watkins and Jesse Lingard, who've had decent seasons, and Ward-Prowse, who's saying, had decent seasons. And you know what I mean? You're like, how on earth Saka made it into that squad? I don't think he's... I mean, obviously, he's probably not going to play any minutes because they've got so many attacking options, but it just seems like a bit
I'll
of
give
a
you
pointless acquisition.
I'll give you a reason, I think, because, like you say, there's an abundance of attacking options, but Saka can almost play anywhere. He can play... For Arsenal, he'd play wing-back, he could play on the either side of that front three, and I think that's why he's there, because he's not going to be starting ahead of your Kanes and your Rashfords and your Sterlings and your Sanchos up front, and he won't be starting as a fullback either. But if there are injuries in those positions, he's able to fill them, and that's part of the squad, isn't it? You don't just pick. It sounds bizarre to say, but you almost don't just pick your best 26 individuals. You've got to pick something that you can go with for a month, and you've got to blend, and you've got people you can call on. So if so-and-so gets injured the day before the game, you've got someone there you can slot in.
But what about James Milner? He does every position on the field, even centre mid. Do you know what I mean? If you want that utility guy, why go with a fledgling when you can go with tried, trusted and true James Milner?
Oh yeah, I think James Miller he's a legend, isn't he? But has he retired? Has he retired?
Yeah, he has.
So
Yeah.
you know,
Bring him out.
maybe I'm sure Gareth would have loved to have made that call, but maybe
I
he
feel
didn't
like
fancy it.
it's interesting. Sorry, just going briefly to the midfield. Like the one that caught my eye then was Jude Bellingham. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel like Jude Bellingham is going to be a brilliant player. But realistically, like the way that Jude Bellingham is in this squad is a little bit like when Theo Walcott was in the England squad for the first time. As in, like, I don't know. I feel for me, if you're looking at that, I'd be thinking surely you should be taking Jesse Lingard, like, you know, bit more experience. You know, I don't know. I just feel like Jude Bellingham, like, he is very good, but he's also very young, and he's been good for like one season. Whereas, okay, I know Lingard is in more like this season he's been excellent. Before that, he had a bit of a rough time. But like he has played for Man United, and you know, and he's played for a West Ham side that have got European football. So I feel like Lingard's. I never thought I'd say this, but I feel like Jesse Lingard's very unlucky not to be in that squad. To be honest.
And to be fair, Southgate
Very
at the
lucky.
beginning was picking players on form, and now he seems to have gone with sort of.
He seems to have gone with names. I think.
Yeah, he has, and I don't know. I'm not so for that in a sense. I think this squad selection doesn't paint Southgate great. I don't think. What
To
were you
be
gonna say?
fair
Sorry,
on
Dan?
Bellingham, Bellingham has been playing in the Champions League this season and won the equivalent of the FA Cup in Germany with Dortmund this season. So
He has.
I don't think you. Can, I don't think.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying about experience, but I don't think you can say Jude Bellingham has not been in the form to warrant being in this conversation.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is in realistically, if you're picking Jude Bellingham, like, is there as in like realistically, is Jude Bellingham going to be a starter? Probably not. I wouldn't think. Therefore, I think I'd probably rather have somebody coming on who's perhaps maybe a bit more proven than Bellingham is, just purely on, you know, because like let's be fair, Bellingham has had a great season this season, but like we've all seen one season wonders. All it could take is for him to have a bad season next season. I don't know. I just think Lingard's a bit unlucky, to be honest. As in, like he was probably one of the form attacking midfielders in the tournament in the league. Sorry, Premier League.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. Lingard definitely was in with a shout.
Yeah,
Who would you be picking in goal? Henderson or Pickford?
Henderson, any day of the week.
I agree with you there. I just think Pickford's in. Not injured. I was going to say injury prone.
So-
I didn't mean that. I meant accident prone.
He's so overrated, Jordan Pickford. I don't understand. You know, like for a little while, you know, like he did have a good run of form, to be fair. You know, like in the last World Cup, he was good. But I don't know. I feel like there's been enough time between then and now for Southgate to have gone with a different keeper and bedded him in and just stuck with him. Like I don't rate Jordan Pickford at all. Really don't.
Fair enough.
He's never made a mistake for Southgate though.
Has he not?
That's the bizarre thing. I read some stats somewhere where, like, in 30 games, he's never, like, you know, like mistakes leading to goals.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
something like that. Something like 30 games or however many it is. You know, a decent number. He's not made a mistake. For Everton, it's a different kettle of fish. But when he turns up for England, he seems to put in a more solid performance. And for Southgate, if he's done a job for him, it's hard to not pick him, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean, I guess that this goes back to the kind of thing that Jack was saying earlier. Does he pick on, you know, Southgate is always kind of plumped for this, I pick on form, not on, you know, prior experience. Well, I think if you're picking on form, well, I mean, I say that, Dean Henderson hasn't exactly been playing week in, week out for United either, has he? So,
Yeah, he played.
Yeah.
He played the Premier League for the end of the season. It was he didn't
Yeah,
play
but-
the Europa because they let.
but as in he's not played as much as Pickford, has he? You know, as in like Pickford has basically played every single game, I'd imagine.
He
for
has, but they
Everton.
haven't been in
So-
as many games. That's probably worth. You know what I mean? Henderson's probably said he's played the same amount, but it's just not obviously for the whole season. But it's just the fact that United play in more competitions than Everton because better team. Any other sort of what do you guys think of the midfield? Oh, we didn't mention Jude Bellingham, but do you think you think there's enough in that midfield to really go up against some of the big boys? I mean, you really are looking at Declan Rice and Jordan Henderson to put in a proper shift this tournament.
Yeah, I feel like, for me, like looking at that team, I feel like they've got a major imbalance. They've got loads of defenders, loads of forwards, and then like not many midfielders at all. Like for me, when you're looking at that team, you've got Bukayo Saka, Jadon Sancho, Phil Foden, Raheem Sterling playing two positions.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, like Marcus Rashford, he's one of those players who can play through the middle or out wide. So I really don't think you need 4 players for 2 positions when you've got a fifth who can play in either of those positions. I think, yeah, that's what I think personally.
That's fair enough. Anybody else got any last comments before we go on to our predictions for the tournament?
Only that locally that Ben White used to play for Newport County. So
I thought you were going to say Swansea.
No.
Yes, another.
No, I did see that, yeah. 2016, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2018, I think.
Oh,
yeah, so
it was an even number.
It's a big day for the locals, yeah.
That is actually quite... He's not Welsh at all, is he?
No, he was just in on loan
No.
here, I think.
You never know, do you? Could always be an off chance. Going on to the predictions then. Predictions for the tournament winner? Who wants to start? I mean, I know we sort of insinuated that I feel like most of you are choosing the French team. Is that the case?
Yeah, I'd be back in France.
I'm saying France or Belgium, but if you want me to pick one, then France.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that.
I'm going for Italy. I just think defence wins titles, and they haven't conceded an 8, so it's a pretty good one. That's my opinion. Surprise for the tournament? It can be a player or a team. Someone good, someone bad. You know what I mean? Whatever. Mine was Ukraine making the semis. I mean, you reacted quite highly to that, which I wasn't. Well, I was a bit surprised how highly you reacted. But yeah, any big surprises you think are going to come up?
I think England will get knocked out of the round of 16. I don't think they're going to get any further than that.
And to be fair, if they do win Group D and come up against the runner-up of Group
Group
F,
of death.
that is very much on the cards. Anybody else for a surprise of the tournament?
I don't think it would be a giant surprise, but I'm going to say that my potential surprise would be either Portugal or Italy in the semis.
Even that's a
I
surprise.
think the reason I consider that a surprise is because I'm picking France as the winners. I think France will win, but all the talk will be about France. All the talk will be about Belgium.
Right, okay.
I think there will be a fair bit of talk about Portugal. I don't think there will be much talk about Italy because Italy are playing very well. Italy look defensively solid, but in terms of big names, and that's what gets people talking. People look at France's squad and they'll go, Mbappe, Griezmann, Kante, Benzema, and people look at Belgium and they'll say, De Bruyne, Hazard, Lukaku, so on, Tielemans, Carrasco. But Italy don't have a bank of star names, but I still think they'll go far in the tournament. So maybe I'll narrow that down and say surprise Italy in the semis, because I don't think Portugal generally would be quite such a big surprise.
Okay. What about you, Dav? Or that's if you have them.
Well, in regards to teams, it is that thing, isn't it? Like, who's going to do a Wales? Is there going to be any kind of team that bolts and does better than expected? Where it's hard when like Italy get into the semis, or I was thinking I do think that the Netherlands have got the potential to do quite well in this tournament. But then I thought, is that really a surprise? Because they do have good players. So I think the Netherlands could do quite well. And then in as far as a player, maybe one to look out for. It's a bit of a I don't know. I just think this could be the tournament where, like, it's been disappointing that Zlatan Ibrahimovic is out injured, isn't it? But I mentioned earlier when talking about the groups that I think Sweden will finish second. That's mainly because I think that they've got a really young winger whose name is Kulusevski. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Dejan Kulusevski. And he plays for Juventus, and he's been, like, apparently tearing Serie A apart. So this could, I think, if you want a player to look out for, maybe that would be quite interesting. See how he gets on. Will he be the new Zlatan? He's only 21, I think. He's got a lot ahead of him. Be good to see if he can power Sweden out of the groups and maybe into a quarters.
Fair. And perhaps probably the easier question is top scorer. I mean, I've gone with Harry Kane, if I'm honest. I think he's got the easiest group for it with Czech Republic and Scotland, who both concede like mad. What about you guys?
Well, when I wrote these notes, I said Karim Benzema, but since this podcast started, Karim Benzema has gone off injured for France. So he has. They think it's a dead leg, but he did go off after about half an hour. So
you're going to go with Giroud?
And then Giroud came on and scored a brace.
Wow, what a man!
Best player in that French squad.
But I think if
your prediction, Jack.
No. I think if Benzema is fit, I think Benzema's top goal scorer, just because of the team he's playing in.
That is slightly irritating because I think exactly the same thing, and I don't like the trend of I'm just copying all of your predictions. You said France, I said France. You said Benzema, I said Benzema. My head said Benzema. I saw that you had put Benzema on the notes, and I thought, right, let's try and think of somebody different. And I've come back to Benzema. Benzema scores goals. That's what he does. And I know that sounds such a simplistic thing to say.
Working hard,
Benzema's
scoring goals.
Working hard, scoring goals.
Benzema's scoring record is ridiculous, and he's one of those players that his goal record is better than what you think you're seeing on the pitch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there are some players that you see on the pitch and their scoring record isn't as good as you think it would be from watching them. But Benzema's the opposite. Like, this is a strange thing to me. A little bit like Salah. You watch Salah and then you see his numbers and you think, how has he scored that many goals? But he just scores. That's just, his numbers are ridiculous. And Benzema is a little bit like that. He's in a ridiculously good team. And I think France will be to the latter stages, because my head went Lewandowski, but Lewandowski has never been as prolific for Poland as he has been at club level, and I don't think Poland will be there in the latter stages, whereas I think France will be there late. I think that gives Benzema a good chance of being positive.
All right, you, Dev?
Well, I'm going to disagree with all of that, and I'm going to say that I think this is Romelu Lukaku's time to shine.
Ooh,
he's been playing well for Inter, isn't he?
He's been playing really well for Inter. Like, you know, he's fired them to the title. He's got a midfield where he's got De Bruyne, Tielemans, possibly both Hazard brothers if Eden gets fit. Put in some lovely passes in for him. So I think it's hard not to, with the form that he's in, the team that he's in, the chances of Belgium going quite far. I think this will be the tournament when Man United fans go, why couldn't he have done that for us?
You didn't have a first touch, that's why.
Well, yeah, but here's you talk about Benzema's record for France. Like, I don't think nobody scored more goals for Belgium than Lukaku has. Like, I think he scored something like 60 and 90 or something ridiculous. Like, it's really good numbers. And I think this will be the tournament where those things come together. And if Belgium go on to get to a final, as they possibly could, Lukaku will have a big part to play in that.
Cool.
Fair enough.
Over to you, Jack.
Does that bring us to the end?
I think it does.
That brings us to the end. Well, there we are. Thank you all for listening. Josh and Dav, thank you both for coming on. Pleasure as always.
Thanks very much, guys.
That's all right. No worries, no worries. As always, we are on YouTube and Spotify. Why not give us a follow or subscribe if you're listening on YouTube? As usual, we're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Anchor, and Jack and I will be back soon with the next podcast. So thank you all for listening, and we shall talk to you all soon.